Alhamdulillah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والمحصنات من النساء إلا ما ملكت أيمانكم كتاب الله عليكم وأحل لكم ما وراء ذلكم أن تبتغوا بأموالكم محصنين غير مسافحين فما استمتعتم به منهن فآتوهن أجورهن فريضة ولا جناح عليكم فيما تراضيتم به من بعد الفريضة إن الله كان عليما حكيما ومن لم يستطع منكم طولا أن ينكح المحصنات المؤمنات فمما ملكت أيمانكم من فتياتكم المؤمنات والله أعلم بإيمانكم بعضكم من بعض فانكحوهن بإذن أهلهن وآتوهن أجورهن بالمعروف محصنات غير مسافحات ولا متخذات أخدان فإذا أحصن فإن أتين بفاحشة فعليهن نصف ما على المحصنات من العذاب ذلك لمن خشي العنة منكم وأن تصبروا خير لكم والله غفور رحيم يريد الله ليبين لكم ويهديكم سنن الذين من قبلكم ويتوب عليكم والله عليم حكيم والله يريد أن يتوب عليكم ويريد الذين يتبعون الشهوات أن تميلوا ميلا عظيما يريد الله أن يخفف عنكم وخلق الإنسان ضعيفا Sadaqallahu al-Azim. So the translation, near translation is, and married women except those who your right hands possess. What this refers to is the previous ayah that we went over last week. حُرِّمَتْ عَلَيْكُمْ أُمَّهَاتُكُمْ. So how many groups of women were prohibited in marriage? Does anyone remember? How many types of women are mentioned in the Quran?
15 times.
MashaAllah. Who said 15? MashaAllah. Yeah, you got it. 15. So there was 1 in وَلَا تَنْكِحُوا مَا نَكَحَ آبَاؤُكُم مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ, 13 in that long ayah, حُرِّمَتْ عَلَيْكُمْ أُمَّهَاتُكُمْ, and 1 in this ayah, right? So 15 in total. And they're forbidden in marriage due to 3 reasons. What are the reasons? What are the categories of the prohibition? Like why are these?
The fathers, when they're married, and then the forefathers.
Right. No, that's good. What I mean is like there's different categories too, right? So for example, there's 3 general reasons why these women are prohibited. 2 of them are permanent prohibitions, 1 are temporary prohibitions. So the permanent prohibitions, you'll never be able to marry them, therefore you'll never have to wear hijab in front of them either, right? So one of them is through birth, meaning some of your blood relative, like aunts, like uncles, parents, siblings, these are forbidden forever in marriage, right? Then there's those who become forbidden through milk relationships, right? And we talked about this, like perhaps if you want, if our cousins get together and you don't have any intention of having your cousins marry one another, you could make them foster siblings, right? Give them milk from the same woman, they'll be mahram to one another, they don't have to wear hijab, etc. They're able to do that. And
If they want to marry, then what happens? If you already did that.
It's illegal.
they can. So that's what you have to see the urf, right? Like over here in America, I can tell you the kids that are born here, you'll never have cousins that want to marry one another. It's considered.
In America,
Huh?
people, who are non-Muslims, they marry each other.
Nowadays, I don't think so. Even now?
No, they don't.
Yeah. But in the Desi, kids, like I'm saying, like my generation, we all consider it to be like siblings are like cousins are like siblings almost.
Christians don't marry cousins.
So it just depends on your family. Like somebody asked us last week, like, what if I'm attracted to my cousin? Okay, then if there's that problem, if there's that fear, rather I should say, then you shouldn't do it. But if your environment is such that like in your family, the cousins, they just don't marry. right? Like some families they have that. Then you could do this. It's not farz, wajib, anything. It's just
But
a.
if you are, she's your sister in your wada,
Then you can't
you
get married.
cannot. I mean,
Cannot.
it's
Haram.
forbidden, haram.
Like it happened in Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's time that there was some people, they found out after the fact that they got married, that they were. So then they had to break them.
It is going to be a new bid'ah in American Muslim society. They would not marry, they would say, you know, cousin marriage is not allowed. So I think we need to be very careful.
Inshallah. Like I said, it is based household to household. I'm not saying every Muslim American needs to do it. But like in my family, I'll say for example, right? And my daddy was like, no, cousins should never marry cousins. Why? Because there was like a problem. In two cousins, they got divorced, right? There was an issue like that. So like if families break up, we're not going to do it anymore. We don't do it. And our cousins, they come, we sit together, we talk, this, that. For us, it's easy. But yeah, it's like nobody's ever going to say it's farud, wajib, anything like that, right?
Maybe it's like similar family to family. Like,
Yeah, family to family is the way. The last way that marriages are prohibited are through marriage, right? So meaning you get married to a woman, a woman gets married to a man. Forever, the mother-in-law, father-in-law are haram in marriage. Then there's other relations that are temporarily haram. Like for example, sister-in-law. The sister-in-law is haram to you in marriage while you're married to your wife. If she passes away, if you divorce her, you're allowed to marry your sister-in-law, right? Now in that case, she has to keep wearing hijab because it's not a permanent prohibition. So now coming back, وَالْمُحْصَنَاتُ مِنَ النِّسَاءِ. So who all are prohibited? Women who are married are also in this prohibition, but it's a temporary prohibition. While they're married, they're haram. إِلَّا مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ, except for those your right hands possess, meaning slaves. Kitab Allahi alaykum. This is a decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon you. And lawful to you are all others beyond this, provided that you seek them in marriage with gifts, with your property, desiring chastity, and not secret relationships. So for whatever you enjoy from them, give them their due compensation as an obligation, and there's no blame upon you for what you mutually agree to beyond the obligation. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ever knowing and wise. So we'll go over this ayah and then we'll go to the next ayah inshallah. So this ayah, the first thing is there's a long discussion about mut'ah and this and that. Inshallah, to keep it not so lengthy, we could discuss it inshallah next time. And next week we won't have class inshallah. Week after inshallah we will, on August, what's today? Today's 29th, right? So we're not the first week of August, the second Friday of August, inshallah we'll resume. Next week we won't have it, inshallah. Okay? So now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالْمُحْصَنَاتُ مِنَ النِّسَاءِ. It's forbidden for you to marry women who are already married. This is obvious, right? Because they're in somebody else's nikah. Whether or not that person is Muslim, even then it's haram for a Muslim to marry them, right? Meaning, if a woman, okay, she's married to a non-Muslim. Now in this case, a Muslim woman can't be married to a Christian man, but let's say there's a Christian woman married to a Christian man. Technically a Muslim can marry a Christian, although we talked about how it's not free of karaha. So you say, well, you know, he's a non-Muslim, let me marry her as well. Islam prohibits this. Why? Because the whole purpose of nikah is that a woman is khas with one man, right? She's not having relationship with multiple people, because one of the maqasid of deen, one of the important things in deen is to preserve one's lineage, to know where the lineage is coming from. So males are allowed to have multiple wives, but women can't have multiple husbands at one time. Why? Because otherwise the lineage is not protected. And we talked about last week the different types of words that they use, or different types of arrangements that they applied the word nikah to in Jahiliyyah. There were 4 of them, right? And only one of them was the nikah that we recognize as nikah today. All of the other ones, they would lead to the lineage being mutilated, right? Or the lineage being muddled. You won't know who the person is married to. إِلَّا مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ. There is one exception to this though, except for slave women. Now Islam, it allows slavery. You can't, sugarcoat that fact. And unfortunately, sometimes the youth, they become like disillusioned. They read in the Quran, okay, they're slaves. Or in the time of the Sahaba, they were slaves. How could Islam allow slavery? And then lead some people to atheism. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect. There's a really good book that you can read. If you don't want to read it, listen to the book. It's an audio book. You can get it for $10, $15 by Jonathan Brown. It's called Islam and Slavery. It's a really good explanation and explaining what slavery is. Now, it's part of Islam. Now, it's not practiced anywhere in the world today in the traditional sense. Yeah, then there's like human trafficking, and you could say that those are types of slavery. You could even say people who are imprisoned in jails and they're forced to work, that you could call that slavery, all of that. But the Islamic definition of slavery right now in the world, it doesn't exist, right? But there's certain conditions, and if those conditions are met, slavery can come back. That's why these laws are in the Quran forever. And so we have to learn them. We don't have to go into too much detail, but we can't deny it either. Nor can a person consider it bad. Yes, we could say that Islam encourages the ending of slavery, for sure. Because for so many things in Islam, for so many penalties in Islam, the penalty is freeing a slave. Along with that, so much reward is mentioned for freeing slaves. Even if a person has a female slave, if they free them and then they marry them, great reward is mentioned for them as well. At the same time, we can't deny that it's allowed in Islam, again, when conditions are met. إِلَّا مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ. So slave women who are married, having relationships with them or marrying them is allowed, but on certain conditions. Number one, a war has to take place. Number two, the women have to be taken captive, right? Number three, you have to leave from Darul Harb, the land of war, and you have to come back to Darul Islam, right? Islamic lands. When that occurs, when you come into Darul Islam, it's allowed that even if the woman is married to somebody else in Darul Harb, their marriage breaks, right? The marriage breaks, and after one cycle passes, this is not called idda, it's called istibra'i raham, that you make sure that they're not pregnant. After that, relations are permitted. When did this happen? This is the Shan Nuzul of the ayah. This ayah was revealed after the battle of Awtas. This hadith is in Muslim, many prisoners were taken as captives of war. But the Sahaba were hesitant. They didn't know if they were allowed to have relations with them because they were married. So then this ayah was revealed, right? So after you bring them back to Darul Islam and their husbands are in Darul Harb, the marriage is broken, right? So much so that if their husbands are also taken captive, right? If their husbands are taken captive and together, a husband and wife, they're brought to Darul Harb, you can't marry them, right? Because they're together in the same way. إِلَّا مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ كِتَابَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كِتَابَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ. This can mean that either this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's decree upon you, right? Or it can mean that it's an obligation upon you. Both of these are okay, right? Maktubun alayk, that this is decreed upon you, it's a responsibility upon you, it's fard upon you to follow this. Not just this, all of those previous 14 relationships, all of these you can't marry any of these people. Kitab Allahi alaykum. Then وَأُحِلَّ لَكُمْ مَا وَرَاءَ ذَلِكُمْ أَن تَبْتَغُوا بِأَمْوَالِكُمْ مُحْصِنِينَ غَيْرَ مُسَافِحِينَ. Besides for these, all other women are halal to you in marriage. Now there are others who are prohibited in the ahadith, right? But the hadith is an explanation of the Quran, and also the usul of those prohibitions in the hadith you can tie back to these ayat as well. So besides for this, وَأُحِلَّ لَكُمْ مَا وَرَاءَ ذَلِكُمْ أَن تَبْتَغُوا بِأَمْوَالِكُمْ مُحْصِنِينَ غَيْرَ مُسَافِحِينَ. So all women besides for this, they're lawful for you, provided a few conditions. Number one, what is the condition in a marriage? The first thing, what do we sit together? What do we consider the nikah to be?
Mahar.
No, before the dowry. Ijab and qubul, right?
Yeah, acceptance.
Yeah, the offer and acceptance. Ijab and qubul, right? So, an tabtaghu, that you seek them. This is referring to ijab and qubul, right? So you give a ijab and qubul. So the husband, he offers, or the wife can initiate as well, right? Or her wali can initiate, and that's usually what happens in the marriages. The wakil or the wali, they initiate, and then the husband accepts, or vice versa. Both of them are okay. Antabtahu. Number two, bi amwalikum, that you seek them through your wealth, meaning mahar, right? Meaning a dowry. A dowry is something, a mahar is something that in Islam it's important, and it's obligatory when a marriage takes place. To the point that what happens if two people they get married and no mahar is ever decided, automatically the woman is entitled to mahar misl. You take like the average mahar that other women in her family from her father's side received, she automatically is entitled to that, even if the mahar isn't decided upon. Now what is the mahar? There's a difference amongst the fuqaha, right? Imam Ahmad, Imam Shafi'i, rahmatullahi alayh, they say it is whatever the woman asks for. It doesn't have to be anything tangible either. For example, that's okay, Abdullah Nizar and Hamad Hafizah, the Shafi'is and Hanbalis, they say that you could tell a woman, I'll teach you Quran, so I'll marry you, right? That'll be your mahar, I'll teach you Quran. So the Shafi'is say it's okay, Hanbalis they say that it's okay. Hanafis and Malikiya, they say no. They say that there's a minimum mahar, and that mahar, it has to be tangible. It has to be actual wealth, money, or something that you can put in your hand, right? Not a service, right? The Hanafis say at least 10 dirhams. The Malikis, they say 2.5 dirhams, right? And both of them, they take the proof from this word. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, bi amwalikum, with your wealth. You seek them through your wealth, referring to something physical. The Hanafi say that the word amwal, this is a jama'. Jama' means 3 to 10, right? At least. This is jama' qillah. 3 to 10. So the Hanafi say it has to be more than 2. It has to be between 3 and 10. And there's a riwayah of Jabir radiallahu anhu where he says that the mahar can be less than 10 dirham. That's why the Hanafi say you have to give at least 10 dirham. The Shafi'is, Hanbalis, they have a hadith. They have a hadith in which Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, a woman came to him and she offered herself in marriage. Hadith in Bukhari Sharif. He said, Ya Rasulullah, I gift myself to you. The Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he looked at her and he decided he didn't want to marry her. So one poor man, he stood up, he said, Ya Rasulullah, if you don't want to marry her, let her marry her to me. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, what do you have? Do you have anything to give? He said, I don't have anything except the sheet that I have on. So you can't give that. So then he said, go to your family, see if you have anything, see if you have a ring, see if you have something. He went back, he said, I couldn't find anything. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, I married you. Or he said, no. Then Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam asked, do you know any Quran? Do you have any Quran with you? He said, yes. I know this surah, I know this surah, I know this surah, I know this surah. He knew many surah. So Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, okay, I marry you to her for the Quran that you have. So that's their hadith, that's their dalil. And it makes sense. But the Malikis and Hanafis, they have responses. Number one, if you look at the words in Arabic, it could be that I marry you on the basis of the Quran that you have, meaning that this shows you're the beloved of Allah. Later on you could give the mahar. So you don't have to give the mahar initially. Number two, the ahadith, they don't always have a timestamp on them. We don't know when it took place. It could have taken place before this ayah was revealed. Number three, there's two types of mahar, right? There's mahar mu'ajjal and mahar mu'ajjal with an ayn, or they call it muqaddam and mu'akhar, right? So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's sunnah is that when he would get married, he would give the entire mahar at one time. This is the sunnah. If you could do it, it's better to do, right? But in that time until this day, sometimes it's difficult to give the full mahar. So what happens is a smaller amount, something is given up front, right? Like a gift or something is given, and then after that the full mahar is given over time or is given at a later date. So that in the hadith it could have been mahar muqaddam. Wallahu alam, they're okay, this is just what the different mazahib say. An tabtaghu bi amwalikum. Third condition. Muhsinina ghayra musafihin. That you marry chaste women, غير مسافحين, and not wanting, musafihin, this means to
by force or
no,
forcing them.
No. That's not what it means. Over here, basically it means a zani. It means for pleasure, for fun, right? This is what it means, right? To safah, it means like even safah al-ma is even to like pour water, right? So what this means, just for fun, right? Just without any intention of keeping them for a long time. غير مسافحين. So now we have three conditions.
The word safah means killer or bully or something.
Right.
From safaha.
Right. So over here, there's three conditions. Number one, that you seek them with ijab qubul. Number two, that there's a mahar. Number three, that you marry a chaste woman hoping to keep her. You want to keep her, not, just to have some fun for a temporary period of time. Okay, over here, there's one other thing to discuss. This word muhsanat, it has three meanings, right? So it's sometimes the meaning of hisn. Has anybody heard of the book Hisnul Hasin?
Yeah.
Hisnul Hasin, famous book of du'as, right? Hisnul Hasin. It means the fort, a very strong fortress. So hisn is a fortress, right? So muhsanat, this word, it comes from a fortress. Why is it used? Right? What are the meanings? It's used for a married woman, it's used for a freed woman, and it's used for a believing woman. Why is it used for a married woman? It's used for two reasons. Number one, when a woman is married, she's protected, like you're protected in a fortress from zina. Number two, once she's married, there's not a unilateral divorce from the woman's side in Islam, right? She's in the fortress. She can't go out until the door is open by the husband, right? That's another reason for it. It's also used actually in the next ayah. It's going to be used in the meaning of believing woman. And other times, muhsanat is also used in the meaning of a freed woman. It's also used in the next ayah, right? So now, the third condition is that you marry a chaste woman, meaning that you want to keep them. غَيْرَ مُسَافِحِينَ. Not secret, not a marriage that you just want to, satisfy your desire for a little while and let them go. فَمَا اسْتَمْتَعْتُمْ بِهِ مِنْهُنَّ فَآتُوهُنَّ أُجُورَهُنَّ فَرِيضًا. So for those women whom you enjoy in marriage, فَآتُوهُنَّ أُجُورَهُنَّ فَرِيضًا. Give them their mahar, their due compensation, which is obligated upon you. The Shias, what they do is they take this ayah. We'll talk about it more next week, all of the responses from the ahadith and everything, right? 2 weeks from now. But very simple, what you can say is فَمَسْتَمْتَعْتُمْ بِهِ. So this is from the word mut'a. Right before it, it's غَيْرَ مُسَافِحِينَ, meaning not just wanting pleasure, meaning that you want to keep them. And what is mut'a? Mut'a is not for having children. It's for pleasure, right? Number two, they say that, the word atuhunna ujurahun comes. Ujurahun means to give somebody their wages. So you've married them, now you did muta with them, now you have to pay them. But in the next ayah, very next ayah, after the word do nikah with them, the word ajr comes as well. Why? Because in marriage, there's responsibilities from both sides. A man has responsibilities upon the woman. Woman has responsibilities or rights upon the man, right? And when you fulfill your responsibilities, you're paid a wage. So this word ujur, ajr, compensation is used to show that both sides have some responsibility in the marriage. And it's an obligation upon you to fulfill it. So just like that, when you fulfill it, you are entitled to getting some compensation for what you've done, right? That's why this word ajr is used. And remember in Riyadh al-Salihin the other day, there's just another point that we spoke about, and it's very important, right? Whenever you look at the ahadith, whenever you look at the ayat of the Quran, when it speaks about rights, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never addresses a group of people and say, these are your rights. Rather, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam addresses a group of people in the Quran or in the hadith, they always say, these are your responsibilities. This is what you have to give to others, not what you're doing yourself, right? So when a man is reading this ayah, what do they look? فَآتُوهُنَّ أُجُورَهُنَّ. It's my responsibility to give her mahar. Not what she does to earn it, not how she treats me, it's my responsibility to give this to her. Then there's many hadiths about how a woman should be with her husband, the obedience that should be practiced by a woman in regard to her husband. Those are in regard to who? They're in regard to the woman. The Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam is talking to the woman. It's not for the man to go and tell the woman, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said this, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said this, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said this. You have to do this for me. That's not how Islam is. Islam is always look, what do I owe somebody else? That's why when some of the Ansar, they complained to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they felt that they were being passed over for positions that they deserve. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, look, the people I'm giving this position to, they're more worthy. But after I pass away, there's going to be groups of people who are going to be, unjustly favored over you. Meaning you're going to be neglected. So he said, what should we do, Ya Rasulullah? Then Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, you'll see things that you don't like, things that are even against Islam. What should we do, Ya Rasulullah? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, obey the leader. Even if he's bad, obey the leader and hope for your ajr from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because it's not about what you're supposed to get. It's about what your responsibility is, right? So again, we shouldn't go out and say that you owe me this, you owe me that, you owe me this, you owe me that. That's why I said the story too, that there was one scholar and a poor person, he came to him and he said, give me something. He said, I don't have anything. I don't have anything right now. So then the man, the poor person, he recited to him, وَأَمَّا السَّائِلَ فَلَا تَنْهَرْ. The person who asks, you shouldn't turn them away. So the scholar said, go away. I've seen many faqir mufassirin. I've seen many poor mufassirin. This is not your job to do tafsir of the ayah, right? Your job is to do your job. My job is to do what? I don't have anything to give you. So this is what Islam teaches us. فَمَا اسْتَمْتَعْتُمْ بِهِ مِنْهُنَّ فَآتُوهُنَّ أُجُورَهُنَّ فَرِيضَةً وَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْكُمْ فِي مَا تَرَاضَيْتُمْ بِهِ مِنْ بَعْدِ الْفَرِيضَةِ. But there's no harm upon you in whatever you do in the mahar if both of you are happy. So we learn two things. فَمَا اسْتَمْتَعْتُمْ بِهِ مِنْهُنَّ. After the relationship takes place, after the marriage is either A, consummated, or B, the husband and wife, they're alone in such a way that they can consummate the marriage. Meaning nobody else is around and they're alone for 20, 30 minutes, 1 hour, whatever it is. Then the whole mahar is due. Before that, if a marriage takes place, but the husband and wife, they never get together, the woman is only entitled to half of the mahar. If a divorce takes place or if he dies before that. But if they actually spend time together, if the marriage is consummated, or if there is the ability to consummate the marriage, meaning there's khalwa sahiha, then what happens? Then she gets the entire mahar. Then the mahar becomes pakka. The whole thing is due. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that وَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْكُمْ فِي مَا تَرَاضَيْتُمْ بِهِ مِنْ بَعْدِ الْفَرِيضَةِ. However, if the sides come to an agreement with mutual consent, no problem, you're allowed to do that. Meaning, the mahar, if the husband says, no, I want to give you more, the wife can take it. Or if the wife wants to forgive the mahar, she's allowed to do that as well. Or reduce the mahar, she's allowed to do that as well. إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ عَلِيمًا حَكِيمًا. Verily Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all wise and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all knowledgeable. However, Mawlana Ashraf Ali Thanwi rahmatullahi alayhi, he gives some good advice. He says that in our society, a lot of times, women, I don't know about here, he's writing about India and Pakistan. He said a lot of times the women, they're kind of pressured into giving up their mahar. So he said rather than saying that she's happily giving up her mahar, even if she says that I forgive the mahar, go ahead and give her. Give it to her. Then if she wants to give it back to you, let her give it back to you, right? But don't just say, okay, you said it's maaf, I'm not going to give it to you anymore. Rather go ahead and give it to her, even if she says that it's okay, and then let her do what she wants with it, right? So that will really show that she's happy with it. And this ayah is very important, right? These two parts, فَمَسْتَمْتَعْتُمْ بِهِ مِنْهُنَّ فَآتُوهُنَّ أُجُورَهُنَّ فَرِيضَةً. Because sometimes what happens is a man, what they'll do is they'll announce a very high mahar to show, this is who I am, right? I have this status. And then they plan not to ever give it, right? Or on the other hand, you have women who are forced into forgiving the mahar, right? So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, look, it's set in stone. You have to give it fariḍah, it's fard upon you. However, if both sides mutually consent, then you're allowed to reduce it. You know, one person, they asked me this question, so I'll just share it as well. They asked, does the mahar have to be announced at the wedding? Does it or not? Yes or no? How much the amount of the mahar?
No.
Does it have to or not? It doesn't have to be, right? Now, should it be announced? There's two ways of looking at it. Some people, they go ahead and they announce the mahar. For example, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, although his mahar wasn't announced, it's known how much it was. Like Aisha radiallahu anha, she said that all of the wives of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, they received this much in mahar. If mentioning the mahar will be a means of encouraging people to give a mahar properly, or a means of, encouraging daughters, fathers to, see, okay, this is how a mahar was given, or the mahar was a little bit less to make it easier to get married, or if it's to show men that, look, you should go ahead and try to give a good mahar. If the intention is good, that's fine, right? You're allowed to do it. If the intention is to boast or to show off, it's not allowed. And if it's not announced at all, no problem. It has no bearing on the nikah, but it should be agreed beforehand, right? It should be agreed beforehand, and if it's not, you go to mahar misl. Okay? And also this mahar fatimi, we talk about this a lot. We won't really say that it's sunnah. If a person wants to take mahar fatimi, it's fine. But the girl shouldn't be pressured into taking Mahar Fatimi. The girl should ask whatever she wants, and the general guideline is look at what other women in her family are getting from her father's side, and go ahead and ask for a similar amount. Because now what happens, if a marriage breaks down, the woman is entitled to the mahar. Technically all of this alimony and this and child support a woman is allowed to take. Alimony is not jaiz, it's not. Islamically it's not jaiz for her to take alimony. But if her mahar was Mahar Fatimi, $1,000 or something, then she's not going to really get anything afterwards. If you set the mahar very high, then if there's Khuda na khasta, if there's a divorce, she'll get that whole amount. And this is one of the wisdoms of mahar. There's two wisdoms of the mahar. Number one, it makes the marriage more set. The man looks at it as a responsibility. Because the woman can't leave the marriage unilaterally. The man can end the marriage if he wants. He can give talaq. But if he knows that I have to give her this entire mahar and I won't get it back and she won't forgive it or anything, he'll think about it 2 or 3 or 4 times, right? And there's no limit to what she can ask. Yeah, man doesn't have to, if the girl asks for $100,000, you can say, well, you're not in Jannat ki Hoor either, I'm not going to marry you. You're allowed to say that. But if you agree to it, then you have to agree. You have to give it to her afterwards, right? One time Umar radiallahu anh, he stood up on the mimbar. And during the khutbah, Umar radiallahu anh, he said that the mahar are getting too high. I'm going to set a limit on the mahar. A woman stood up. Does anybody know who this woman is?
Khawla.
Khawla radiallahu anha. The one about who this قَدْ سَمِعَ اللَّهُ قَوْلَ الَّذِي, the first ayah of Surah Mujadala, 28th para is revealed as well. She stood up and said, well, no, you can't set a limit. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that there's no limit. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, we went over 2 weeks ago, آتَيْتُمْ إِحْدَاهُنَّ قِنْطَارًا. Even if you gave them a mountain of gold in mahar, فَلَا تَأْخُذُوا مِنْهُ شَيْئًا. You're not allowed to take anything away from it. So mountain is a huge amount. How are you going to set a limit? Umar, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, if you gave a mountain, you're not allowed to take it back. Umar radiallahu anh, because who was he? He was waqafan inda kitabillah. When he heard the book of Allah, he would stop and he would listen. He said, you're right, you're right. I shouldn't have said this, or you're correct, I can't set this limit, right? Umar radiallahu anh was like this a lot. There's another hadith in Bukhari, that there was a man who was in the gathering, he was like in the you could say the cabinet of Umar radiallahu anh, and he had an uncle. The uncle was Uyayna bin Hisn. He was like a very rough type of person. Some even say that he was a munafiq. So he told his nephew, give me an audience with Amir al-Mu'mineen. He said, okay, fine. So he asked Umar radiallahu anh's permission. Umar radiallahu anh said, okay. So when this man walked up to Umar radiallahu anh, the first thing he said is that, you do zulm on us. You're not fair. You don't give us what we deserve. So Umar radiallahu anh he got upset. He was about to hit him or something. So then what his nephew did, his nephew said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا. When the jahilin, when the ignorant people speak to you, just say salam, ignore them. And then he went further, he said, وَهُوَ مِنَ الْجَاهِلِينَ. And my uncle, he's from the jahilin. So Umar radiallahu, he just stopped. And then this person, he said about Umar radiallahu, كَانَ وَقَّافًا عِنْدَ كِتَابِ اللَّهِ. Waqf means to stop, like in Quran, there's a waqf. He said Umar radiallahu, he was extremely, meticulous in stopping. When the book of Allah was recited, even if he was ready to do something else, he would stop. Okay? So now, one thing about the mahar is that it makes the man more serious about it. Number two, it makes both sides feel more comfortable. When the man is willing to give a mahar to the woman, right? What happens? His family is like, okay, he's ready to do something with his life, right? Now he's on his feet. The girl's family will be happy as well. They say, look, our daughter is going to be taken care of and she's being valued as well. This is the most valuable thing a person has. Before marriage is their money, right? Because you don't have children. So you have money at that time. So then you're saying, I'm willing to give such an amount in order to make a halal relationship. But again, when it comes to the mahar, both sides have to be flexible. Look at the time, look at the situation. If you have a daughter, you don't want her to get married for like a low mahar, like $500. At the same time, if you set the mahar so high, it's going to be difficult for any guy to marry her. And speaking of difficulties in marriage, I'll just add this because there's adults here who have daughters that are near marriageable age, or if you have daughters, inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will raise them to that age, or you have sons of that age. So this is something that I'll point out, and I know that it's true. It's true. On Tuesday, we have this youth talk in the summer. all the high schoolers, college students, they come. I said this, all of them started laughing because they knew that it's true. And this is the biggest problem that's occurring in the marriages today. What's happening is girls, they're going above and beyond in their studies, right? The girls, usually. And I'm talking about American kids, the, mashallah, people like you that came and did their masters in America, like, mashallah, you guys are doing great. But I'm talking about American kids. What's happening is, the girls, Muslim girls, they're excelling in their studies, right? They go ahead and they get a master's and they get everything, they get a good paying job. The boys, not so much. What the boys do is they go to college and they get a 4-year degree in 7 years. And they take a gap year in the middle too. You're laughing because you've seen so many people do that. They take a gap year in the beginning, a gap year in the end, they quit in the middle, they start to work, and then after that they say, I'm gonna just take the 6-month course and I'm just gonna get into a field that's not relevant to my field, right? That's what happens. So now what happens is these girls who are so accomplished, they're like 22, 23. So why am I gonna settle in marriage? Because the guys that are 22, 23, many of them are not even done with their bachelors. And they, they're messing around, they don't really have any plan. So who should I marry? Why should I settle for that? So the girl says, I'm not gonna settle. She doesn't get married. Now next thing that happens, she's like 26, 27, she's starting to get older. Now from these boys, there's a few of them, they work really hard. And they go ahead and they sacrifice all of their fun. They go, they take the MCAT and they get into med school, they're in residency now. Or they, they do their masters, or they get a good job and they're really successful. Now those guys, what happens with them is, they're now 26, 27. Why am I going to settle for somebody who's 26, 27? I have my pick right now. That's what's happening. That's the big issue with the marriages. So you have girls who are older, because when they're younger, they're not compromising at all, right? And they're putting such conditions, like any girl from Chicago, the rule is, it's like Chicago is like hudud-e-haram. They can't go outside of there. They'll demand that the husband needs to move here, right? They won't move from there. And so guys, they're not willing to marry them. And then they get older, now it gets more difficult for them to get married. So I don't have a solution. But at least identifying the problem, that's the first step, right? Inshallah, you all can work on the solution. For the guys, study hard. Have a plan. Be able to show your future father-in-law, okay, I might not have anything right now, but this is my plan and I'm working towards it. For the girls, you should, inshallah, the parents should talk with them as well. Since we're on the topic, I'll add one more thing. My friend here, mashallah, he has really good kids. His kids are in college now. He told me he sees one other problem with the marriages, why there's so many divorces. He said that in the previous generation, kids will have to do work, right? Even in my generation, because I'm like one generation above you guys now. Like my mom would tell me and my brothers every day, you guys are bekar, your wives are gonna hate you, you clean this, you cook this, do that, like housework, we'll have to do it as well. He said the problem now in this generation is that the parents are putting such a premium on education that not sons, not daughter, neither of them are having to do anything. Their parents say, no, we'll feed you, we'll cook for you, we'll wash your clothes, we'll do everything. Study, take Kabir prep, take it a second time, take the SAT 5 times, take the MCAT 3 times, take the DAT this many times, right? So neither of them ever really learns how to work and take care of someone. Now you get married. When you get married, neither the girl nor the guy knows, they can barely take care of themselves. Now you have to take care of someone else. And then there's a division of labor. So the girl doesn't want to do work, right? Or the guy says, I'm not going to do anything. Then both of them say, hey, my life was better beforehand. Why do I want to deal with this? And nowadays, there's no problem with girls being educated. It's good. But before, they might not have had any option. Now they say, forget this, I'll live my life happily. So this is what's happening. So all of you all, mashallah, some of you have kids in high school, college. Some of you have young children. Think about this and find a solution, inshallah. إن الله كان عليما حكيما. Next ayah. ومن لم يستطع منكم طولا أن ينكح المحصنات المؤمنات فمما ملكت أيمانكم من فتياتكم المؤمنات. This ayah we're going to go over quickly. Why? Because it has to do with slavery, and we don't have that issue. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, whoever of you is not able to marry muhsanat. Over here, muhsanat refers to free women. Muhsanat al-mu'minat, a believing free woman. فَمِمَّا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ. Then marry a slave woman, min fatayatikum mu'minat, a believing slave woman. Wallahu a'lamu bi imanikum. Now a person may say, how can a slave be a Muslim? Meaning they don't have knowledge and this and that. They're probably just saying that they're Muslim because they live in a Muslim society. Allah said, Wallahu a'lamu bi imanikum. We judge on the apparent. If somebody says that they're Muslim, we believe that they're Muslim. You don't, get into all of their business. Like just the other day, I did a nikah over here. Right? Many of this. Like one time, the girl, she's Hindu, she came, she read the kalima. Then I did the nikah right after. Of course, they had the marriage license and everything. This time too, this couple, they came. The woman was Christian, the man was Muslim. And she read the Shahada. After that, I got them married, right after. Now, I do ask them, like, okay, I explain that this is what Islam says. Do you have any questions? Sometimes they actually research, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they do this just for the sake of the marriage, right? Now, is it my job to look inside of their heart and say, are you really Muslim? Are you just saying it so that you could get married? No, that's not my job, right? You said the kalima. Now, okay, many a time we've seen that the one who said the kalima just in order to get married, they end up more pious than the one who was born Muslim, right? So Allah says, Wallahu a'lamu bi imanikum ba'dukum min ba'd. The second thing, a person may think, why should I marry a slave? They're considered lowly. Allah says, ba'dukum min ba'd. You're all from a man and woman. You're all sons of Adam alayhi, sons and daughters of Adam alayhi salam. There's no better or worse when it comes to humanity. You can marry them. Ba'dukum min ba'd. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, however, since they're slave, فَانْكِحُوهُنَّ بِإِذْنِ أَهْلِهِنْ. Marry them with the permission of their masters. وَآتُوهُنَّ أُجُورَهُنْ. And give them the same word, ajr. Give them their wages. But see, over here, it comes after the word nikah. So this is showing it's not muta. This is nikah. And the word ajr can be used for mahar as well. فَانْكِحُوهُنَّ بِإِذْنِ أَهْلِهِنَّ وَآتُوهُنَّ أُجُورَهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Give it in a good manner. And what type of women, if they're slaves, how should you marry them? Muhsanat, chaste. غَيْرَ مُسَافِحَات. Not wanting to do zina. Not wanting just to, fulfill your desires and let them go. Number 3, وَلَا مُتَّخِذَاتِ أَخْدَانِ. This means like they don't take secret friends, meaning they don't take boyfriends and this and that, right? Meaning that they're chaste. فَإِذَا أُحْصِنَّ فَإِنْ أَتَيْنَ بِفَاحِشَةٍ. So when they're married, فَإِنْ أَتَيْنَ بِفَاحِشَةٍ, if they committed indecency, meaning they commit zina, فَعَلَيْهِنَّ نِصْفُ مَا عَلَى الْمُحْصَنَاتِ مِنَ الْعَذَابِ. Then they get half of the punishment of what over here, muhsanat means a free woman, unmarried woman gets, min al-adab. What is the punishment in Islam if a married woman commits, or married man commits zina? What is the punishment? Rajul, stone, right? Now, of course, it's only in a Muslim government, so you can't do that here, right?
I think jalt.
Huh? No, jald is for unmarried. Unmarried.
Yeah.
So if there's a fornication, meaning they're not married, then it's lashes, 80 lashes.
80 lashes.
No, 100 jalda, 100.
100 jalda. And if she was not, half of the 100 jalda, 50 jalda.
Mm-hmm. If the woman is married or the man is married and they commit zina,
100.
no. Rajul. This is established from ahadith. If she's married, if they're unmarried, then 100 jalda, then 100 lashes, right? If it's a slave, then they get 100. They get 50 lashes. Half of that, whether or not they were married. Why? Because the slave is a property of the master, so you're gonna be ruining their mal. But if they're stoned to death, right? However, it's not recommended to marry slaves, right? The reason is this: the Malikiya, the Hanabila, the Shafi, they have many conditions. Hanafis have less conditions, but the reason that it's not like to marry them is because if you marry them, the children that the women have, they'll be slaves of the master, right? They'll be slaves of, they'll be slaves of the master because she's still the property, right? ذَلِكَ لِمَنْ خَشِيَ الْعَنَةَ مِنْكُمْ. So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this is for him who fears sin. وَأَن تَصْبِرُوا خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. But if you're patient, it's better. If you're patient, if you don't marry them, it's better. وَاللَّهُ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. And if you commit sins here and there, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He forgives you, right? يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ لِيُبَيِّنَ لَكُمْ. Now these 3 ayahs, they're like a little turning point in the surah. Meaning it's another transition, I should say. Transitioning from, very heavy laws of marriage, laws of inheritance, right? Now we're going to shift to laws of society, mu'asharati laws, how to deal with people, how to deal with things in the society. So we'll start with that inshallah, not next week, the week after. Inshallah we may speak more about mut'a as well, about why it's impermissible. We speak about that again in 2 weeks. But these next 3 ayahs, يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ لِيُبَيِّنَ لَكُمْ وَيَهْدِيَكُمْ سُنَنَ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ وَيَتُوبَ عَلَيْكُمْ وَاللَّهُ عَلِيمٌ حَكِيمٌ وَاللَّهُ يُرِيدُ أَن يَتُوبَ عَلَيْكُمْ وَيُرِيدُ الَّذِينَ يَتَّبِعُونَ الشَّهَوَاتِ أَن تَمِيلُوا مَيْلًا عَظِيمًا يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ أَن يُخَفِّفَ عَنْكُمْ وَخُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا. Abdullah bin Abbas and Abdullah bin Masud radiallahu anhu, they say that Surah Nisa, it has 3 ayahs, and one of them says 5 ayahs that I value, that I love more than dunya and whatever the dunya has. And these are 3 of those ayahs. These next 3 ayahs number 26, 27 and 28 of Surah An-Nisa. We'll continue from here, inshallah. Not next week, the week after. Also this coming week, Riyadh al-Salihin will also be off, as I'll be traveling, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.